Well, hey, Ruckus Makers. I'm joined today by Bonnie Low-Kramen, who's a highly sought after TEDx speaker, teacher, and founder and CEO of Be the Ultimate Assistant, a curated training solution for corporate leaders and assistants creating synchronous and thriving work environments. She is also the author of a forthcoming book out at the end of February called Staff Matters. Bonnie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Danny. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you. And so, Bonnie, let's go back to London in 2012, and you're watching an opening speaker talk to executive assistants. And the speaker asked a question you never heard before. The speaker asked, "Raise your hand if you feel well managed." What happened next, and what did that tell you?
I was at the back of the room, and there were 250 people, mostly women, in the room. And what I saw was a real shocker. There were very few, maybe 25 people who actually raised their hand. And, you expect to see something like, yes, I'm well managed. But really, I was seeing more like, not sure, kind of reluctant, very lackluster, no real enthusiasm. And I remember standing at the back of the ballroom thinking, what is going on here? Because I'm looking around and I'm seeing very seasoned executive assistants here. And in London, these are real serious professional people. And they were being asked a very serious question and they were answering. And then that sparked a real curiosity in me to understand, like, what is going on? Why is it like this?
Right. Yeah. And I think we're quite curious about that too. Like you said, you expect folks to raise their hands and say that, yeah, I'm well managed, but
Well,
the
I don't know how it
reality
was
is much different.
when you first began your career, but I remember coming out of college thinking, oh, well, I had an assumption in my mind thinking, well, whoever's managing me, who's ever given that responsibility of being my executive, they must know a lot and they must be right about everything because they're being given this responsibility. And wow, it didn't take very long to find out that that's not true. Right?
Yeah. We make assumptions about organizations, leaders, that are highly effective. And you think that the training, the support, all of that would be there. But more often than not, when you look under the hood, so to speak, there's an absence, there's a void. I'm currently working on a book myself on entry plans for principals. And you would think that, districts would say, here's what highly effective principals do. Here's basically a roadmap, if you will, for running an effective school. And that's just not the case. Usually you get the job and it's like, good luck, don't mess it up, So anyways, and I think that brings us to another question. When you got home from London, you read an article and the article's title was, "We Wait Too Long to Train Our Leaders," right? Isn't that kind of what we're talking about? But what did the article teach you?
I mean, this was aha moment number 2, where when I started digging into the research, I was putting my mind on the fact that, well, okay, so where do leaders learn how to manage people? And the obvious answer is, MBA programs, business schools, that's obvious, right? And I started looking into the curriculum at, very famous business schools and then smaller ones. Found that article written by Jack Zenger in Harvard Business Review called "We Wait Too Long to Train Our Leaders." And it was one of those moments that made me gasp, because what he and his team had done, and Jack has written many books, and I've since met him and been in conversation with Jack. He and his team did a poll of 17,000 leaders around the world in 2012. And they figured out that the average age that a leader gets their very first training is age 42. And 42. It was like eureka. That's the reason. It's not that leaders were setting out to be, they simply haven't learned how. And even worse, in 2021, during the pandemic, Jack and his team did the poll again, Danny. And they
Yeah.
figured
What
out
did
that
they
the
find?
average age is now 46. So it went up 4 years.
Hmm.
So you don't have to be a math wizard to figure out that most leaders are out of school more than 20 years before they get their first training in managing people. And I asked Jack when I had a chance to speak with him in New York City, I said, why is that? Why are business schools, even some prominent ones, not teaching this? And he said, Bonnie, it's the wheels of academia move slowly. And, apropos to our conversation today, and
Yeah.
it has not been in the curriculum. The curriculum is about black and white subjects, macroeconomics, international finance, accounting, that kind of thing. And he said, Bonnie, what you're talking about are soft skills, emotional
Mhm.
intelligence,
Yeah.
relationships. And he said, the truth is, most college professors are not trained to teach that. The silver lining in the pandemic is that business schools, and business professors have told me this, they are taking a look now. They are revising curriculum now in 2023,
Mhm.
started in 2022 to add curriculum into the program because no leader has been trained about how do you manage a workforce that's partially at home, partially in the office,
Right.
and
Right.
working in a hybrid remote way. Like, it was unprecedented when the pandemic hit in 2020.
Mm.
So obviously, business schools are keenly aware that some changes need to happen. So that's a really great thing.
Yeah.
The issue with that is curriculum's not going to be ready till 2024, 2025. So what do people do in the meantime? It's an
Mm.
issue, Danny, I think, of the world running far faster than our human ability to keep up with those changes. That's what I see. And my hope is that Staff Matters can create an opportunity for some new conversations between the leaders and the staff that's sorely needed, desperately
Yeah.
needed.
Yeah. Yeah. And figuring out, some of the I guess the soft skills as you mentioned, right? In terms of leading effective teams, and it's something
Mhm.
ignored. You were talking about in business school, same is true, right? When you become a principal and you're going to graduate school to get that certification, it's
Right.
about assessments, it's about discipline, it's about legal, but not necessarily how to manage and work with people to create change. And it's
Yeah.
such a missed opportunity, but all those little things are actually what leads to the outcomes that we want. And I don't realize or I understand why that gets missed so often. So it sounds like Staff Matters is a good manual, right, in terms of building those great cultures and
That's
working
my
with
hope,
teams.
and I was able to interview like 1,500 people for the book, including many
Wow.
leaders and assistants and HR
Hmm.
professionals and recruiters who shared their actual stories and case studies. And I asked leaders, where did you learn to manage people? And they confirmed
Hmm.
that they did not learn it in business school, including, and I got approval from people to include their stories in the book. People like Hubert Joly, who teaches right this minute at Harvard, and he wrote the book, The Heart of Business. He's the former CEO of Best
Hmm.
Buy. He understood the value of going out of his CEO office and going to, down with the people who are selling you your phone and your computer and your
Right.
television sets.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
even he said he did not learn how to manage people in college. So it
Yeah.
doesn't seem logical to me that in 2023 we're leaving it to luck, and that's not good
Hmm.
enough. I see that staff are suffering because of that lack of education. So that's why I'm delighted to be speaking with you today, and let us really put the spotlight on this subject because it's no longer possible to begin your job either as a school principal or leading a company, large or small, and not receive any supplemental training to how to do it well, and how, which leads to retaining people or chasing them away.
Hmm.
What do you want?
Yeah. Yeah. So do you have some practical advice? If that's the reality, it could be 2 decades before a leader gets that great training. And so there's
Mm,
a absence of training, but there also is probably many instances of other leaders who haven't gotten training. They're doing their best, but they're providing actually a really poor example of what to do,
mm,
right? It's more an example of what not to do. So if a
yeah.
ruckus maker listening, if that's their experience leading a school, what advice would you have? What do they do?
Step one would be to look at the people who are already on the payroll. You know,
Mhm.
no matter what the organization is, somebody at some point hired each and every one of those people for
Yeah.
a reason, at least one reason, but probably many reasons. And so the Danny, what I see is one of the biggest opportunities that leaders are doing is that they're skipping over the people they've painstakingly hired in the first place. Those staffers see and hear everything, but they may not be saying what they're seeing and hearing out of fear
Hmm.
or feeling as if their opinions and their thoughts really are not of interest to their leaders. And my suggestion for any leader is start with if you have 1,000 people on your payroll, of course it's impossible to talk to 1,000. I'm saying
Right.
choose your top 5, from different departments, just like Hubert Joly did, to go down to the floor and meet with the team leader, actually have conversations with some key staff members who,
Hmm.
what I would bet any of them a nickel is that once you start asking questions, how are things going? What are you worried about? What do you see that we could do better? What do you feel that is happening that you wish I knew, but I don't know, that you think I don't know?
Yeah.
And then just listen, because if you choose selective, carefully people to, they call them listening tours. You've probably heard that
Mhm.
term.
Mhm.
Choose carefully people who you want input from, and I promise every leader they're going to get an earful. That's one of the easiest things to do. And during the pandemic, the leaders who had the highest retention were the ones who spontaneously on any given day picked up the phone and called staff members and said, "Hey, you're home. How are things going? How's the family?
Mhm.
Anybody sick? What, how are the kids?" The idea that leaders actually care to ask is one of the easiest things to do, and it's the thing that is missed most often.
Right. Well, it's that quote, right? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I think it was Teddy Roosevelt, but I could be wrong on that. So I think that's what you're
I would
illustrating. And
I buy that.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So people want to know that their leader cares. I think, you talk about the 4 things that every staff wants.
Mhm.
What are those 4 things?
Yeah, last year I gave a TEDx talk, and in my mind I was thinking, well, this might be the only TEDx talk I'm ever going to give in my life. So I'm going to
Okay.
reveal what I believe are the top 4 things that staff wants. And that number 1, hands down, no contest, is respect. They
Mhm.
want to feel respected for the role that they occupy, for the seat that they have. They want to feel respected for it. And the antithesis of that is to feel like a number and that they don't matter.
Mhm.
They want to feel that they matter. No matter it can be the janitor. They want to feel that they matter for what they do.
Right.
Second thing is to have a sense of belonging and purpose in the company, that there's a reason that they're there and that they are part of a system and they understand expectations and other people see them for who they are. They have the freedom in belonging. People then are free to be who they are. And I've had staff say to me, Danny, that they stay in
Mm.
jobs that might not necessarily be the highest paid, but they
Right.
stay because they feel free to be exactly who they are. Number
Yep.
3 is fair compensation. People want to be paid fairly. And there are far too many people in the world who, in all the tumult with the workplace, are underpaid. And then
Mm.
fourth is to receive ongoing support for professional development and growth. There's almost nothing more powerful than for a staffer to have money invested in their professional development, which sends a message. The message they get is, I'm worth it. I'm worth taking time off to go to that class, and my executive is willing to pay money for me to go. It's
Mhm.
another way of having a staffer hear words like, these are golden words, things like, I have complete confidence in you. I believe in the work you're doing, and we appreciate you. Those kinds of things are gold to staff. So it's respect, belonging, fair compensation, and support to keep learning and growing
Beautiful.
in
Well, I'm
that
enjoying
order.
this That's right. Okay. So cool. I'm enjoying this conversation, Bonnie. We're going to get
Uh,
in some messages from our sponsors. And when we come back, I'd love to hear about how we can work with our assistants more effectively.
I love that.
Today-
Thanks.
Today's show is sponsored by Harvard's certificate in school management and leadership. Learn how to successfully navigate change, shape your school's success, and empower your teams through this program. Get online PD where it fits your schedule. Courses include leading change, leading school strategy and innovation, leading people, and leading learning. You can learn more and apply today at betterleadersbetterschools.com/Harvard. Today's show is also sponsored by Organized Binder, a program which gives students daily exposure to goal setting, reflective learning, time and task management, study strategies, organizational skills, and more. Organized Binder's color-coded system is implemented by a teacher through parallel process with students, helping them create a predictable and dependable routine. You can learn more and improve your students' executive functioning at organizedbinder.com. Finally, I'm just going to invite all the ruckus makers watching and listening. We're hosting an incredible live summer event for 50 school leaders, and that's happening in Denver, where we're revealing a brand new framework called the Leadership Optimization Compass. The guiding question that is directing everything we do at this event is, what would be possible if you were consistently operating at your best? You can learn more and register for this event at betterleadersbetterschools.com/Denver. And we are back with Bonnie Low-Kramen, the author of Staff Matters, which is coming out. If you're watching the video, if you're listening to the podcast, the book Staff Matters is out, and go pick it up. And before the break, I mentioned how I'd love to talk to you about working with our assistants effectively. Um,
Mhm.
Most principals, not all, but most have some kind of assistant, and usually they are underutilized, right? And so, what tips do you have with effectively working with your assistant?
Yeah, I've worked with several groups of school secretaries, and that's education is one of the few remaining places using the term
Mm,
secretary. So in
mm,
some, they're being referred to as assistants. So it's essentially the same. But a school, we refer to assistants in the world as the backbone of the organization and right arms
yeah.
to their leaders and the eyes and the ears and the lifeblood. They're pretty important. They're pretty important. And yet, you point to one of the main complaints of assistants around the world, and that is that they feel under leveraged and underutilized. Now,
Hmm.
there's no sense hiding from the fact that no one works as a school secretary because they're looking to get rich, right, Danny?
Yeah. Right.
They're
Totally.
the
100%.
motivation to work in a school is different than working in a corporate environment. And so there needs to be an acknowledgement that there are all kinds of reasons why people hold down
Hmm.
jobs. But if someone is selecting that work, the baseline for all work, no matter if it's a school secretary or anyone actually, is to be treated as a professional and with
Hmm.
respect. That is the basis for all relationships. And I would urge principals to explore as secretaries SMEs, SME, subject matter
What is that?
expertise.
Ah,
Subject
okay.
matter expertise is a SME. Everybody has a SME. You know, we all are walking around being experts in at least one thing, but probably many
Mm,
things. And what I see is that any assistant is being asked to do, you know, the job description, the tasks on a
right,
paper,
right.
but it's not so simple, especially in a school setting. What's not on that task list is to have, you know, really great communication with parents and students and teachers and be the eyes and ears for the principal. And so it serves the principal to perhaps allow the school secretary to sit in on a meeting or two that she, you know, all secretaries are still 95 to 97% female. So chances are it's a woman, to have her sit in on a particular meeting or two upon which she might have some input. It is valuable for them to have one-on-one time so that to understand what the subject matter expertise of each secretary is. You know, we each have a resume, but it may be that your school secretary, I'm just talking here, but is, you
Mhm.
know, is whose partner or spouse is actually the chief of police or the chief of the fire department, and they happen to know a lot about active shooter plans or disaster planning. And, you know, that's a real hot button in schools these days. You
Mhm.
don't know whose expertise is lurking there unless you ask. And so it really
Right.
speaks to the point we talked about earlier, which is to take principals would do well to take the time to take a fresh look at that secretary's resume and to actually have a one-on-one at least once a week. But, you know, some assistant executives have like a 10-minute check-in daily. It really depends.
Sure.
It's very particular to their partnership. But in 2023, it is a partnership. It is that it's no longer this hierarchical system, mainly because of the complications of our workplace. And the idea that, I don't know, the last time I checked, we still, doesn't matter who you are, we only get 24 hours in a day, only a certain amount of hours that we're at our work. And so the smart school principals understand the talents and skills of their secretary, so that it's possible that maybe the secretary can actually handle situations
Mhm.
that the principal doesn't even have to be involved in, mainly because she
Exactly.
is adept at it. She's been there 10, 15 years. To not leverage what she knows, because it's not only what she does, the tasks, it's about what she knows, the institutional knowledge, and who she knows. It's all
Mhm.
about the people, isn't it? You know, she happens to
Yeah,
know, you know, who to call, who, like that's the secret sauce with assistants, in my view.
right. Yeah, it's that network effect. So you call it SMEs, I call it zone of genius, but it's identifying people's gifts, right? And making
Yeah.
sure that you put them in positions where they could shine, where they can, show their brilliance. So thank you
And it's
for
a
a
win-win, isn't it? You know,
huge win-win.
they're,
Yeah.
you know, the morale improves, productivity improves, their confidence increases. It's just a
Mm.
win-win to fully understand someone's zone of genius. I love that. And their SME. You know, what's your SME? Any
Yeah.
assistant would, you know, you ask her or him what the SME is, they'll tell you, I'm the PowerPoint guru, I'm a foodie, I know all the great restaurants in town. They have an
Absolutely. Yeah.
amazing array of expertise. I promise you that.
Brilliant. So in our intro chat, you shared a statistic that was shocking to me that only
Mm,
7 US states require training around sexual harassment in their companies, and the rest of the states, which is the majority, that this is an optional thing. That really is
yeah.
dumbfounding. It blows my mind. So maybe it's true for schools as well, but we want to have environments, obviously, that are safe and inclusive and welcoming, and
Yes.
not, where you'd find sexual harassment. So how can schools create those safer environments?
It is a complicated subject, and most any staffer would quickly acknowledge that no real change happens in any institution, whether it be corporate or educational, without support from the top. That unless
Yeah.
it's supported from your leaders, it's not going to happen. So therefore, and in my book, I have a whole chapter where I literally call it sex, which is about gender in the workplace.
Hmm.
And I expose the reality, the data around the subject. Because the reality is that when, the majority of people who are sexually harassed are women. It's not that men
Hmm.
are not sexually harassed. Some are, but the vast majority are women, and the vast majority of perpetrators of sexual harassment are men. And so therefore, in our educational systems, there needs to be an expectation set up front before anybody gets hired, that there is a zero tolerance policy around sexual harassment, and that it is a subject that is talked about, and it is taken out of the land of the forbidden and the taboo, because the reality is that it is a traumatizing experience. Any woman who, and I've experienced mild versions of it in my life, fortunately, but some of the stories that I share in the book, and some are not shared, are jaw dropping. And there are huge problems with both sexual harassment and workplace bullying, but the reality is that when it happens, the trauma of it lasts for years. It's not just temporary. It it stays with a person. And so, like most other things, Danny, education is the key. So we need to shine a light and say, we are not, this is no place for sexual harassment, and this is no place for workplace bullying. Because guess what? The kids are watching. The kids are
Hmm.
watching closely the behaviors of adults. They're sponges, aren't they? So
They are.
this problem is is very important to address openly among adults in organizations, so that our children don't see role models that somehow make it okay to comment on women's bodies, or
Right.
uh, using language that is sexual in nature, and it spreads into online social media, and the things that are okay and what are not okay. And it really is going back to a baseline of professionalism and respect. And a respectful workplace does not permit sexual harassment or workplace bullying, period. End of story. So even if it's not mandated by the state to have sexual harassment training, it is valuable to have it, to have something is better
Sure.
than nothing. The key there is, and I include this in the book, Danny, is that yes, I'm advocating for training, but unless the leader says this is important to
Yeah.
do, because if they don't, if they're like, we have to do this, it's a box we have to tick, it's just an obligation, that it loses all effectiveness. So there really does need to be an authentic commitment to understanding why this is dangerous.
Yeah.
That's what
Right.
I think.
So you gotta lead from the top, right? And set those
I do, and I
priorities. So
think from the middle, I think teachers have influence on principals,
definitely.
but that requires speaking up, doesn't it? That
Hmm.
requires,
Hmm.
hopefully, leaders, your principals, your superintendents are making it safe for teachers to raise issues that are of importance to them. And so, so I do think change can be influenced from the middle.
Got it. So Bonnie, if you could put one message on all school marquees around the world for a single day, what would your message read?
respect everyone, no exceptions.
And if you were building your dream school, you had no constraints in terms of resources. Your only limitation is your imagination. How would you
Mhm.
build this dream school? What would be the three guiding principles?
That everyone would receive a written set of expectations in our school. And our school begins with the principles of respect and professionalism for everyone. Number two, there is a response that everyone understands that they have a responsibility to speak up about issues that matter to them, and that there's a commitment and a celebration of diversity in our school. And that just like everyone is a SME, a subject matter expert, everyone is there for a reason. And maybe the question becomes for everyone in our school, what's your reason? What's your purpose? What lights your fire? And when we ask those questions, then race and age and shape and size become much less important, and it becomes more about what a person cares about. That would be my dream
There's
school.
some powerful questions to end with there. We covered a lot of ground, Bonnie. So, of everything we discussed today, what's the one thing you want a ruckus maker to remember?
You know, my mother, who was a school secretary, she used to say, just try to leave the world a little better than the way we found it.
Mhm.
That every person is dealing with a battle. Every person, and we don't see it. We don't necessarily
Mhm.
see, we only see a portion of what other people are going through. And so my message to each and every one of you and your listeners is to choose kindness, just a friendly, what can I do to help you? What do you need? And how can I help? Kind of thing. That may be just the thing to make somebody's day. And, we just don't have any idea how we really do touch people in the world. So every day's a new opportunity to give it another shot. And I think that's a worthy endeavor. Thanks, Danny.